Hello, I'm Paul Merrill. I am Principal Software Engineer in Test at Beaufort Fairmont Automated Services. You can find us online, beaufortfairmont.com. I'm also the founder of the company. And we work with teams to figure out how to help their testing and development groups work in sync, to sync those up within the course of an iteration for agile teams. We also work to accelerate automated testing within your team, whether it's traditional or agile. So today I'm here to talk about public relations related to automated testing. And this concept came up several weeks ago for me. I do these webinars, or we do these webinars every once in a while, about every month we do them. We'll take the month of December off in 2016 because it's kind of a month where lots of people are doing lots of different things related to their beliefs and all of that. So there's lots of holidays in December, so we'll take December off, but we'll be right back at you in January. But this idea came up several months ago, and someone asked the question, basically, how do I get more exposure for my automated testing efforts? And they had several reasons for that. We'll get into the exact question as we go through this. But it was a really interesting idea to me, and I realized that there are plenty of times when I'm working with teams or with clients, and I have the need to make it really clear to them what it is we're doing and how we're helping them achieve their goals as a business or as a team or as an organization. And over the years, whether I was working with clients in the capacity as another business or as a consultant, or if I were working with them as an employee, there was always this need to show what you're doing and to help people make decisions based on real data that comes from your activities. And there has to be a good way to help people see that. And so I thought, well, that's a really good presentation. Let's sit down and put that together and share it with you all. So I'm very glad that you've joined me. I hope that you get a lot out of this. You may see me from time to time looking over at the screen, and I'm looking at the controls from GoToWebinar to try to make sure that I'm showing you what I intend to be showing you, and doing everything I can to help you get the most out of this experience. Thank you so much for being here and for spending your time with me. A few things that are going on with me. Right now it is November of 2016, and with our organization as well, we'll be out at TISCA in the Research Triangle. This is a meetup that we have here locally in North Carolina, and it is the Testing Information Systems Quality Assurance Group. I'll be out there with my friend Angie Jones, and we'll be doing the Dominoes of Automation. It's a workshop that we're also going to be doing out at STP in Phoenix in March of 2017 together. And it's a really great workshop that kind of teaches through toppling dominoes the fundamentals of automated testing. And so it's a fun thing to do. I hope that you can join us either here at TISCA on the 8th of December in 2016, or join us out in March of 2017 in Phoenix. I look forward to seeing you all there. Also, I'll be working with the Automation Guild, which is a virtualized conference. Joe Calantonio, who runs the podcast called Test Talks, is putting on a virtual conference for automated testers by automated testers this year. And it's going to be super fun. That's in January of 2017. It's called Automation Guild, and I'll be talking about my data patterns, data strategy patterns for that, and getting into detail with those. So I actually go through code examples of that and some real-world examples of how we implement these patterns as we go along through our careers. There's some really good other speakers at that as well. Make sure to check out the lineup on Automation Guild. So with that, let's get started. Let's talk about the public relations of automated testing. So, I went out to the Google and I tried to figure out what do they believe public relations is. And so I got that as a part of this overview. We're going to do four things here. We're going to talk about what is public relations. We're going to talk about why we need public relations with regard to automated testing. How do we implement it, which is the most important and biggest piece of this, and then what will tell us if it's working. So I'm a tester. I assume you've got some test background or something along those lines if you're watching this. But as a tester, I want to know if something's working. I want to validate that something's working the way that I expected, or verify that it is. So that's what this final step is here. It's just my nature. I can't help it. So what is public relations? And I went out to Google, as I mentioned, and got their definition. And the way that they explain it, they say it's the professional maintenance of a favorable public image by a company or other organization or a famous person. The state of the relationship between the public and a company or other organization or a famous person. So that is what public relations is. And I wonder if that sounds like what we mean when we talk about automated testing and our teams and companies. It's got a lot of things here that I don't know necessarily sync up, like image. Do we really care about the image of automated testing? Well, sometimes I guess we do, but not really in the public world. We don't care about how it relates to the public unless we kind of take that sphere and close it in, and the public means people on our team and people just outside of our team, people on other teams, people in other departments, people across the organization, or potentially clients who have some privileged insight into the inner workings of the development team that we have. Is it a maintenance activity? Do we think of public relations as a maintenance activity? I would imagine most of us don't. Those of you who are managers and higher middle managers and upper managers, you understand that there is a maintenance activity involved in public relations. And on a scheduled basis, those of you, some of you may employ these tactics to make sure that your relationship with others and the image others have of you are adequate to meet your needs. And that definitely is a maintenance activity. It's something we do in a disciplined fashion again and again and again over time. So I'm not sure public relations really meets what we want, but we're going to use that word today to talk about it. I think really when we're talking about public relations with regard to automated testing, what we're doing is there's something that we want to convince someone of and something that we want to influence people by. And that really talks to me a lot more, or resonates with me more as about selling or about marketing or about communications and messaging than anything else. So we're going to use PR as a term today, but remember, we may actually be doing things like messaging and communications and some relationship building and things that we do in sales and business development. So why do we need PR in automated testing? And I think the answer to this comes in two kind of classifications. So first, either it's proactive or reactive. And when I think about all the reasons for why we would want to be making sure that the image of automated testing is good and that we want to be communicating outside of our little worlds, it really does come down to those two. Either you're using something to convince people, you're trying to convince people of something proactively in preparation of some effort regarding automation, or reactively, something's happened, something's gone wrong, or something's gone right, and we want to put an exclamation point and underline that. So those are the two types of reasons that I see for this. It's easier to prep than to clean up. I believe that very strongly. In most cases, it's easier to prepare for something. It takes less time than it does to clean up something afterwards. So my natural tendency is to opt toward proactivity rather than reactivity. However, that's not how all people are. Some people, by their very nature, are reactive. In fact, my experience has been that testers tend to be reactive. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think we're built for what we do. And we're built in the way that we tend to be reactive. We like to see a product before we test it. We like to have requests made of a product team before we test what the product team has built. These types of things. So we tend to be reactive, and we're in this role because we are. On the other hand, many people are proactive, and I believe that, at least in my experience, developers, higher level managers, and managers in scientific pursuits tend to be more proactive. They're planning. They like to look out in advance and see what's coming and try to prepare for those things. So you may identify more with the proactive ideals with this or the reactive, but knowing each can be helpful, and understanding that some of the things that we're trying to do are one or the other can help us, and help us understand which tactics to employ. So that's kind of where I want to get today. I think really in most of these cases, like I said, we're trying to convince someone of something, and whether it's proactive or reactive, that's the case. And I think that for any of these, with regard to anything you're trying to convince someone of, and I say that I don't like blanket statements, but I guess in most cases when you're trying to do some convincing, first check your own motives. Make sure you understand why you're doing it. Because if you don't understand why, you're not going to be very successful. And it may be that the thing that you're doing helps or actually hurts your true intentions. So check your own motives first. A lot of times I see things like an automated tester wants to spend some time working on a new tool and learning a new tool. And so they take on a project to do that, and they start using that tool everywhere they can. And they want to spread that because it's the new coolness. And I totally get that. I've been there. I wanted to do it. There are lots of tools that I'd like to use right now. But just because you like a tool doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right tool for every job. So if you are a person in that situation trying to spread that tool, I would ask you to check your own motives first. And say, is this something that everyone really needs? Or is it just something that's really cool for me to use? Same thing goes with lots of other areas within test automation and within software development. So check your own motives first. It's going to help you. So I want to get very quickly into how to implement. We said that there are 4 pieces to this. The third piece to this talk is how to implement. Let's get into that very quickly because this is the meat of this presentation in this webinar. The first thing I would say is you're going to encounter resistance. No matter what it is you're trying to convince people of or influence them about, you're going to encounter resistance of one kind or another. The most explicit resistance we find tends to be from individuals or from teams. We notice that because they're telling us they don't want to do something, or they're talking down about whatever it is you want to do, or they're just fearful, or they get quiet, or whatever it is. But that thing that that person is doing, that resistance, is something that can help us a lot. It can help us make our ideas better. It can help us make our pitch or our public relations, our communications better. So I would strongly suggest that once you've looked into your own motives, to accept the resistance that comes to you. So when someone resists you, listen to it. And when you have a chance and the time is right, explore it. If the person's willing to explore it at that particular time, then that's a great time to do it. Many times we have trouble with this in our software development shops. And we have trouble in realizing what the actual situation around us is. So we might have 10 people in a room, and one of them is very resistant to a new idea, and the other 9 are all for it. Well, that's not a very safe place for that one person that's resisting that idea. They don't necessarily want to be beat up on or to have everybody against them or feeling like everyone's against them. So it might be best to take that offline and to sit down with that person and explore that resistance some other time. For that to work at all, there's got to be trust there. Those 2 people have to trust each other and have to be feeling comfortable in having a conversation about what those resisting feelings are. But you want to break down, when you do get into that healthy place, that safe place, you want to break down the resistance. And questions like, what's your top concern? That can be a very good question. Exploring with what's, not necessarily whys. When we ask why, many times people get defensive. So look into what are you, tell me about your experiences. Help me understand where you're coming from. What's your top concern? What are the risks that you see with this? What has your experience been? Those are questions that can open up the conversation. Listen to it, explore it, and figure out how that can help you. And then finally, once you have that top concern, asking the question, if we can resolve that, would you be willing to whatever it is? That can be very helpful as well. Educate. So I find education to be incredibly helpful on a lot of different levels. Teams can come together over education. People can come together. Many times when we're sitting down and we're looking at these ideas that we need PR to help us within automated testing, many times we come down to miscalculations, misunderstandings, people coming from different places. And so education can be very helpful. In fact, I want to do a bit of education that I forgot about here. I had a list of questions that someone asked me in order to start this conversation with you all. And here are the 2 questions that this individual asked and gave me the idea to start this with. The first one was, how do you set the right expectations in your organization on what automation can and cannot do? I thought that was a really good question. It sounds very proactive. It could be reactive as well. Maybe you've gotten into a particular automated testing effort and you need to back people off of certain expectations or push the expectations forward. But that question was an interesting one. How do you set the right expectations in your organization on what automation can and can't do? So that was the first one that got into this public relations talk. The second question was this: how do you get your organization and those unfamiliar with automated testing excited about automation and its value? I'll read that again because it's a little bit of a longer question. How do you get your organization and those unfamiliar excited about automation and its value? So when I think about those two, these are things that come up again and again. How do you get people excited about stuff? How do you set the right expectations? I'm not going to get into necessarily answering those today, but I'm going to talk about the mechanisms you can use to answer those for your organization. So education is one of those. Maybe a lunch and learn. Those are great for corporations to do. It's a great way to get in front of your peers and talk about things that matter to you, talk about these particular issues, maybe doing a report during a lunch and learn about your automation effort, where it is today versus where it was a year ago, where it is today versus where it was 2 weeks ago, and where you see it going in the future, things that you don't expect to ever automate, the reasons for automating something versus something else, how to use the tools that you use with your automation, how anyone on the team can use them, where to see the reports, how to see reports, how to read reports. Those are great opportunities to do education, and that education can really warm people up to you and to your group. It can create relationships. With any education, one of the most important pieces of it is the discussion that happens between the attendees. So when the people there start discussing what their experiences are and how it relates to what you're showing them, and they're discussing it together and contrasting and comparing, they're building out new models on how they think and how they can move forward. And that model is now based on what you're educating them with, and it helps you in moving forward your agenda with regard to automated testing. So agenda can be a very negative word. I don't mean for it to be. I just mean your plan, I guess, in moving automation forward in a way that helps the company and your business. Teachable moments, look for them, and you can find places where you can sit down and have a conversation, educating people on things. Look for opportunities to talk with people and help them understand the automated testing that you're doing and why you're doing it and how it's working and how things are going. What problems are you facing and what can they help you with? What can versus what can't be done, setting expectations, all of those things can be helped through education if people are willing to learn, and that's a key part of that. Know the objectives. This is very important, I believe. Major part of your communications and your work in building out your automated testing tool is going to be based around the objectives or the goals of the people around you. So I had someone that I was talking to recently that had a very interesting take on this. They were working on automated testing in their own silo, in their own little world, and no one else was really taking notice, and they wanted people to take notice and start using the tools that they had created and start using the automation that they created. And I asked, well, so why did you start that project? What was your goal in starting it? And the goal was related to them. And I said, well, what's the goal of your sprint team? And they said, well, it's to get such and such a feature out this month. And I said, well, how are those two related? And they looked at me with a blank stare, and then they said, oh, they're not related. And that's exactly what happens again and again and again on these efforts, is we have individuals who are working on something that's not necessarily aligned with what everyone else is working on. So know the objectives. What are the objectives for what you're doing? That goes back to talking about your own motives, knowing your own motives for things. What are your objectives first? Then, what are the objectives for your sprint or your iteration in your agile environment? What are the goals for the team, for the department, for the company, for the industry? Some people like to think of what they're doing in terms of the industry and moving the industry forward, so that's something to be aware of as well. And then secondly, once you know those objectives, we've got to figure out, do my automation testing goals align with these objectives? And if they don't, in a completely uncompatible, you're going to have problems. Usually there's a way to make automation testing and the goals of a sprint or a team or whatever it is start to line up. And when they line up, then you'll start to see something really great. You'll see more people interested. They'll understand that you're actually trying to help with what the team is doing. So do your part. Understand the objectives. Understand the goals that are going on around you, and then work your automation into those goals rather than the other way around. We have to know what our goals are as a business. When selling, talk benefits. So I think a lot of this is about selling, whether we call it press, public relations, or something else. I think we're selling ideas. We're trying to convince people of things. We're trying to expand our sphere of influence. But I think that when we're selling, we need to talk benefits. This is one of the keys to sales. They'll tell you this. So when I sit down with people, a lot of times we'll be able to bring up specific benefits that by implementing automated testing, for instance, we reduced the average bug fix by 1 week. So the average time that it took to fix a bug was reduced by 1 week. That's huge. And if you can put that in a drawing, even better. Or we want to increase the number, or we have increased the number of test cases run weekly by 400%. I guess that is, we've increased it over the next 6 weeks. We'll increase it by 400%. So talking about those benefits and why that's important to the company. Why is the number of test cases important? Well, maybe you have a certain number of test cases that you were trying to cover, a certain amount of the code base that you were trying to cover, a certain number of features that you were trying to cover. Figure out what those are, what the goals were, and talk about the benefits of the work you're doing in relationship to those goals. So many times it's not numbers too. You see a lot of numbers here, but many times we find people that are not convinced by numbers. I've had people that I've worked with that had no interest in numbers whatsoever, and I had to find a different way to talk to them about benefits. Sometimes it comes down to what keeps them up at night. So asking a manager or a stakeholder, what is your nightmare related to this product? What keeps you up at night? And you may have to narrow that down to what keeps you up at night related to the quality of this product. And if they say, well, it's because I can't figure out how to mitigate the risk of all of our customers not being able to reach our website. Well, that's a big problem. We should focus on that. Let's figure out how automated testing relates to that problem and what we can do about it. Talking about those risks can be very helpful. I've had people that didn't care at all about whether or not a website was up, but the information on the website had to be exactly right. So if the user had a little bit of downtime, it wasn't that big a deal. If the numbers were wrong, we had a big deal. So there are lots of different reasons that people have for implementing quality programs, whether it's a manual testing program or an automated testing program, whatever it is. Figure out what those reasons are and sell them on the benefits of what you're doing. How does what you're doing relate to what they want? Those are the benefits that we're trying to get to. Show, don't tell. So this is an actual illustration I used for a client one day recently. And what I was trying to show was 21 test cases running against one feature and determining that that feature was still working as we expected. And the individuals that I was talking to, they were like, oh, that's cool, those robots. We've got 21 robots, really? Tell me about it. So a picture is worth a whole lot. And I think that make sure that there are ways to show things rather than just telling people. People love pictures. Pictures can encapsulate a lot of different ideas that words sometimes do not. Show, don't tell. I'm telling you, show people. So this was something that I've used. I use this particular chart for clients from time to time to show active test cases. And what you can see in this graph is that we had a really sharp rise in the number of active test cases, and I'm defining that as test cases that were running repeatedly in continuous integration over the course of, on the x-axis we have number of weeks, and this is a cumulative type of thing here. So after two weeks we had over 100 test cases running for this team, and then after what looks like, I'm trying to read the numbers here, after about 3 weeks we were at over 300 active test cases, meaning test cases that were actively running in continuous integration and checking whether or not the code was working as we expected when we wrote the tests, and determining whether or not there were changes to the code base. And you see this going up over time. Something like this can be really helpful. How often do we get questions like, I'd like to understand more of what your team does? Something like this can show them this is exactly what we've been working on. We worked on it a lot during the first 14 weeks, but we leveled off after in the next 12 weeks, and that was because we were working on other things. You asked us to focus on something different, so we've added very few test cases over that time, or we changed resources, or we were distracted by the problem you asked us to solve over here. So all things like this, metrics, things that are visible, can be very, very helpful. Here's one that people love to see, and this is one that we see again and again and again at Beaufort Fairmont when we're helping companies with accelerating their automated testing. This is one that I use a lot to show the estimated costs of manual labor to do what our automated tests do. And what I've found with this particular chart is that people don't believe it. And so I've had to actually open up the numbers and let them walk through the spreadsheet themselves, changing numbers to believe that this is right. And when they get to do that, they're like, you're right, that's absolutely right. Now this is cumulative for one of our clients. I'm not going to tell you who it is because it's their experience, and they enjoyed it a lot. So this is over the course of the number of weeks on the bottom there. At 26 weeks, we had created the equivalent manual labor that would cost $1.3 million. So the investment here in the red line on the bottom was very, very low. So them seeing that was huge, to see where automation is going. How many people, one thing that's really good is to show a picture of how many people it would take to do the work that your automated tests do. And showing that picture can be amazing. That, you know, we do 12 person years worth of work every night. That's happened several times, and we've done better than that with other clients. But to be able to show 12 people do 1 year worth of work every night with automation rather than with human beings doing it. Of course, I believe that we don't replace manual labor, we supplement it. We just need more tools to do what we're doing with manual labor. Many of our manual testers are using these tools now. If it's not automated tests, then it's tools that help assist in their testing. We've got too much to test. We need people to do it, and we need to give them the tools to do it well. So there will always be a place in my mind for manual testers in this. We need their skill set. It is a specific one. Show, don't tell. This is an example of showing the actual output from test cases. So I love to see this in my team's retrospectives. So we'll sit down in a retrospective or in a demo, and the team will actually run the test cases that were built during that iteration. And a lot of times a business owner or a stakeholder will say, hey, look, what does that mean? How do I know that it's actually working? And we'll show them the code. We'll drill down into the code and show it to them. More than happy to do that during a demo. They may not know what that means or may not see how it connects, but at least they got the chance to ask the question and see it. You start building up trust with these things, and as that trust builds and as we see these results, we start communicating better and coming together more. And so what I see is a lot of times a business owner who never saw the results of automated tests before, just heard that they were there, and never heard what was going on with them, sees something like this and they say, wait a minute, you guys are actually doing a lot. Let's talk about this. So that's a place to grab onto. That's a hook. Grab onto it and talk to that person, help them understand what's going on, and educate them on the process and the tools that we're using and how things are working as much as they want to know, and how it's helping their end goals as a business owner. Celebrate issues found with automation. This is absolutely key. If you're going to do nothing else, celebrate the issues that you find with automation. So there are a lot of ways that that happens. The first one here is a tester talking to a developer. So if that's where this public relations needs to happen, then that's where we start working on it. But the tester saying, isn't this awesome? Test automation found this. And you know, many times developers are going to say, well, it'd be really cool if it could fix it too, right? Because that's the type of answer we get from them. Me being a developer in the past, I get to say that. But yeah, talking about the coolness of automation finding an issue and swarming around that as a team and building that up and celebrating it as a team, people are going to hear about that. People are going to get excited about it. And eventually that developer is going to say, you know, I love that I can run these test cases and they find things that I didn't think of, or they find things that changed between yesterday and today. That's really cool. I really like that. And my time to develop things goes down. I spend less time working on bugs, which every developer hates anyway. Not every, but most of them hate anyway. And it means less maintenance work for somebody in the future. Testers in a retrospective, there are just a lot of different ways that you can use something like celebrating issues that are found within automation to your advantage. Another tactic I want to talk about is creating an anthem. So this is from, you may recognize it, this is from an advertising campaign that Coca-Cola did back in the late 70s or early 80s. It may have been both. And they used the song I Want to Teach the World to Sing, and they changed the words a little bit, and they put this commercial on. It shows people singing together, and they're all drinking a Coke, and it's pretty cool. But you know, I saw this and I was thinking about what happens in our environments, and so often we hear these anthems that are negative in our environment, or refrains that are negative. We hear, well, testers can't keep up. I hear that a lot. Or creating automated tests is too slow. I hear that a lot. Well, if they're going to be used in a negative way, why don't we create anthems in a positive way to combat them? So I've done that a number of times. Some of the ones that I love are the idea of, if I were to automate that. So you're talking to someone and they're talking about a test case or a bug that they found, and you say, if I were to automate that, I would, and start talking about how you would do it. That brings a whole different conversation on. And if people hear you saying that again and again and again, now I'm not saying to say it 25 times a day, but once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week might be enough. And then when the other people around you start saying it, we've got something to build on. We can actually start doing the things that we're talking about. Or it couldn't be that hard to automate. I love that type of thinking. One of the ones that I've used a lot is never underestimate what can be automated. Never underestimate what can be automated. Because the truth is, almost anything could be automated. Almost anything. It just may cost a whole lot for us to do that in terms of labor or time or effort or technology. It may just cost a lot to do that. So never underestimate what can be automated. Create your own anthem. How will we know when it's working? This is the part I said, you know, as a tester, I've got to have something verifying the work that I've done. You're going to hear people starting to sing the anthem. So if we're talking about creating your anthem, you're going to hear people starting to sing it, other people. And when they sing it, grab hold. Teach them the words. In other words, I'm using a metaphor here, but teach them the words of the anthem. Show them what's going on with automation. Show them what you've done. Educate them on the process. Sing along. If they're going to do their own automation, learn to do automation with them somehow. Harmonize if possible. If they're doing something different than you, figure out what works really well working together. And if they're using a completely different tool than you, they're using Robot Framework and you're using Cucumber, figure out what they've done about it. Sit down, find some time to sit down with them and have them demonstrate what they've done and why they like it and what they don't like about it. It could be that they're using a tool that you would like to use. It could be that there are things about their tool that you can take back to your world to use and to look into. Maybe there are features that they're accessing within their tool that are actually available in yours. And you just need to go back and kind of figure out between the two of you what works and what doesn't. So harmonize if possible. It's nice to sing with you. Compliment them. It's best when it's genuine. Please do it genuinely. But saying, you know, I really like what you've done there. This is really cool. You've done a great job. I love looking at it. It's nice to sit down here and talk with you about this. You have a nice voice. I like the way that you did that. I like the way that you put time into this. I know you've worked hard on it. So make sure to acknowledge what other people have done. How do you know if it's working? Someone's going to start showing interest in what you're doing. So it may be a developer, it may be a manager, it may be another tester, it could be anyone, but they're going to say things like, I liked what you said in there, or great work, or I'd like to know more about whatever it is. And those are times to grab hold of that person, not really, but take on the opportunity and find the time to sit down with them and teach them more or talk to them more about what's going on. Learn how it affects them. Figure out what's going on with them. What did you like about this? Why do you think this is great work? How do you think this worked out? What would you like to know more about? Those types of things. Have a conversation. If they don't have time right at the moment that they say something that shows interest, set up a time later. We talked a little bit about harmonizing with regard to an anthem. Someone may take on their own effort, and it's very easy to sit down and say, I can't believe that that person started that other effort in competition with mine. In the end, everybody working with you, if they're in the same company, is on the same team. You may not want to believe it, but they are. They're all working toward the same bottom line, and they are there to help you just like you're there to help them. So find a way to look at that other effort. Don't stop them. Explore it together. Figure out how you can work together on it. What have they done that can make things better for you? What have you done that can make things better for them if they're interested? But copying, imitation is the most valuable form of flattery, I think, is the commonest, something like that. But flattery is absolute. Someone copying what you've done can be a very big indicator that they like what you've done, and they may actually be looking for you to join in and help out. So look into that. I only have one reference here. Just going back, you're going to know when this is working. People are going to grab onto it. You're going to see that your techniques are working. We talked about some of what those are. They're things like building an anthem. They are showing and not telling. They're making sure that we're talking about the benefits of what we're doing. We communicate out regularly to the people that are there, and we kind of celebrate the wins and the successes that we have in a way that anybody else can join in on and celebrate with us. Those are the main things here with regard to public relations of automated testing. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate that you joined me for this. Thank you so much. I hope you've learned something. If not, check out one of our other webinars. I've talked about a lot of different things on some of these. I mentioned that we're going to take the month of December in 2016 off. We'll be back in January of 2017. I look forward to seeing you there, registering for new ones. You can reach out to me at paul.merrill@beaufortfairmont.com or just paul@beaufortfairmont.com. You can find me on Twitter. I'm dpaulmerrill. I do a podcast about software engineering and entrepreneurship. It's called Reflection as a Service, and you can find that at reflectionasaservice.com. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Google Play. We tend to have on some really great guests. We're having on Andy Hunt, one of the, I'm blown away to have him on. Andy Hunt, one of the original signatories of the Agile Manifesto. He's going to come on the show in January of 2017. Looking forward to that. Once again, I appreciate you being here. I blog out at beaufortfairmont.com/blog. That's the corporate blog site, so make sure to take a look at that. I just posted something last week called 7 Ways to Better Test Automation, and that post has just blown up. It's had 1,500 views. I've never had anything like that before. I appreciate each and every person that stopped by to read it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that post and hear how you think about it. I got a lot of great comments on that on LinkedIn and in other ways. So thank you very much once again for being here. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Once again, I'm Paul Merrill from Beaufort Fairmont Automated Testing Services. Thank you.